The Galactic Empire arrived without warning, their fleet descending upon Earth like an ominous storm. No one had time to react, not that anyone really expected a peaceful outcome when the skies filled with shimmering alien ships. The Empire was notorious for conquering planets across the galaxy, and Earth, far from the most advanced, was just another name on their list. They came in with their elite soldiers, confident and unchallenged, expecting a quick victory. Commander Thrak led the charge. Towering and imposing, he wore gleaming armor that shimmered with advanced technology far beyond anything Earth had. His troops were just as menacing, disciplined and equipped with energy weapons that could tear through anything Earth had to offer. As they touched down on Earth's soil, they moved with precision, barely acknowledging the humans they saw as nothing more than an obstacle to be swept aside. From their vantage point, the Empire saw Earth as backward, underdeveloped, and primitive. Their high command had scouted the planet for years, watching humanity with an almost bemused curiosity. Their intelligence reports showed humans still using projectile weapons, tanks, planes, and missiles, relics compared to the Empire's arsenal. It was laughable to think these tiny creatures with their crude warfare could pose any real threat. Commander Thrak's face twisted into a smirk behind his visor as he gazed over the human military formations. This wouldn't be a battle. It would be an execution. The first encounter played out exactly as the Empire expected. A small human resistance force, armed with basic rifles and armored vehicles, stood in the Empire's path. The alien soldiers, wrapped in their shimmering shields, barely flinched as human bullets pinged off their defenses. In moments, the advanced energy weapons cut through the human ranks, leaving nothing but smoke and wreckage in their wake. The humans fell quickly, their weapons useless, their tactics outdated. The elite forces of the Empire advanced, showing no mercy. They barely needed to communicate. Each soldier knew their role, each machine operated with cold precision. It was all too easy. They crushed the resistance in minutes and moved on, expecting Earth to fall just as fast as every other planet they had conquered before. Commander Thrak's orders were simple: subjugate or eliminate. He didn't care which. His troops were already preparing to march on the next city, expecting total surrender. But Earth wasn't ready to give up. Far from it. Among the chaos of that first skirmish, a figure stood watching from the shadows, waiting. Soldier Boy, they called him. Not a hero, not some decorated commander, just a regular soldier who had been in more fights than he could count. He didn't have the best gear, but he knew how to survive. And right now, survival was the only thing on his mind. He had seen enough battles to know that this was different, but he wasn't ready to lie down and die, not when there was still a chance to fight back. Soldier Boy had no illusions about what they were facing. He'd seen those alien soldiers in action, far too advanced, too quick, too deadly. Earth's armies were no match, not in a straight fight. But that didn't mean they were finished. Earth had something the Empire didn't expect: sheer stubbornness. In the quiet moments after the first attack, as the smoke still lingered over the battlefield, Soldier Boy gathered his unit. They weren't much, just a ragtag group of survivors from different squads. They had no plan, no backup, and barely any weapons left. But they had one thing going for them: the element of surprise. The Empire saw Earth as weak, already beaten. That was their mistake. Listen up, Soldier Boy muttered to his men, keeping his voice low but steady. They think we're done. But we're just getting started. It wasn't about fancy tactics or high-tech weapons anymore. It was about using what they had, whatever it took to survive. They couldn't take the Empire head-on, not with their shields and energy weapons. But there were other ways to win a fight. Soldier Boy had learned a long time ago that sometimes, you don't need to be stronger. You just need to be smarter. The group moved quickly, sticking to the ruins of the city and using the landscape to their advantage. The Empire's soldiers were trained for precision, for perfect battles fought on open fields. But Earth's terrain was different, messy. The cities were full of tight corners, hidden alleys, and underground passages. Soldier Boy knew how to use these spaces. He also knew how to use the one thing that the Empire's soldiers couldn't anticipate: human unpredictability. They laid traps, makeshift explosives rigged with whatever they could find. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As the elite soldiers of the Empire marched forward, expecting no resistance, they walked right into a series of cleverly set ambushes. Explosions tore through their ranks, collapsing buildings and sending rubble cascading down. Their advanced shields weren't built to handle such chaotic environments. For the first time, they faltered. Commander Thrak didn't understand it. How could these humans, these insignificant creatures, even begin to slow down his elite? It was impossible. But the reports kept coming in. More squads were being hit by surprise attacks, losing men to traps set by a handful of humans. The Empire had never faced something like this before. They were used to crushing their enemies with sheer technological superiority. But this was different. This was irrational. Soldier Boy knew they hadn't won, not yet. This was just the beginning. But for the first time, the Empire's forces were showing cracks in their confidence. They weren't invincible, not here. Earth was a strange place to them, and human resistance wasn't something they could easily predict or control. The aliens were still stronger, still better equipped, but they weren't prepared for the kind of fight Soldier Boy was bringing to them. The Empire had underestimated Earth, and that was their first mistake. The fight was far from over, and Soldier Boy knew that as long as they had the will to fight, they still had a chance. No matter how advanced the enemy was, no matter how many soldiers they sent, humans weren't going down without a fight. And Soldier Boy would be right there, in the thick of it, leading the charge. Soldier Boy and his ragtag group had proven that the Empire could bleed. But they weren't naive. The small victories they'd won so far hadn't crippled the enemy. It had only made them angry. The real fight was just beginning, and Soldier Boy knew it. The Empire would hit back harder, and this time, they'd be ready for Earth's tricks. What Soldier Boy didn't expect was how fast they'd adapt. It wasn't long before the Empire's reinforcements arrived. The skies darkened with their massive ships, and more elite troops poured down from the heavens. This wasn't the first wave, the overconfident soldiers that thought they'd crush Earth in a day. These were battle-hardened veterans, trained to counter resistance. And they came with new orders, no mercy, no hesitation. The Empire wasn't playing games anymore. Soldier Boy watched as the human forces tried to regroup, but it was clear they were struggling. The Empire's next assault was devastating. Cities that had managed to hold out were now facing overwhelming firepower. Entire districts were leveled in minutes by the Empire's massive machines of war. Their shields and energy weapons seemed almost unstoppable now. The guerrilla tactics that had worked before were becoming less effective. The Empire had started deploying scanning drones and advanced sensors, hunting down human forces hiding in the shadows. Earth's forces were losing ground fast. The communication lines between human units were breaking down, and supplies were running low. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the sound of desperate voices crackling through radio channels. Orders and pleas mixed together as commanders tried to keep their soldiers alive. Fear was creeping in, even among the bravest. But Soldier Boy wasn't the kind to give in to fear. He saw what was happening, knew that Earth's forces were stretched thin. The Empire was using its superior technology to pin them down, divide them, and then crush them piece by piece. And yet, he wasn't ready to accept defeat. He gathered his group, a few tired faces looking at him, waiting for a plan. They all knew this next push from the Empire might be the one to finish them off, but they needed to fight back. "Here's the deal," he said, crouching low as they huddled in the remnants of a half-destroyed building. "We hit them hard, fast, and where they don't expect it. We're not going out like this." He had no fancy tech, no secret weapon. All they had were a few scattered supplies, the knowledge of their terrain, and the unrelenting will to keep fighting. The Empire had the numbers, the firepower, the gear, but Soldier Boy had something they didn't: experience in chaotic, unpredictable warfare. The unit moved quickly, using the ruins of the city to mask their movements. They started setting traps again, but this time, it wasn't about luring the enemy into open conflict. It was about slowing them down, disrupting their momentum. Small skirmishes, sabotage, anything to throw the Empire off balance. It wasn't about killing soldiers, it was about making the enemy second-guess every move. But the Empire's response was brutal. More human strongholds fell under their assault. Entire divisions of Earth's military were wiped out in mere hours, their bases turned to ash by orbital strikes. Soldier Boy's unit barely made it through several close calls, dodging heavy artillery and energy blasts that disintegrated anything in their path. The alien war machines, tall and lumbering, plowed through streets, leveling buildings as if they were paper. Yet, in the chaos, Soldier Boy started to notice something. The Empire's soldiers, for all their power, were still soldiers. They were trained to follow orders, to engage in conventional warfare. They didn't handle unpredictability well. The human ambushes, small as they were, still confused and frustrated them. The Empire wasn't used to this kind of disorganized resistance. Soldier Boy's group would strike, then vanish, leaving the Empire's forces scrambling to respond. That gave him an idea. The key wasn't just in fighting harder, it was in fighting smarter. Soldier Boy realized that the Empire's reliance on their technology made them vulnerable in ways they hadn't considered. Their energy shields, their weapons, even their communications, all of it relied on a clean, efficient battlefield. But Earth wasn't clean. Earth was a mess. And that mess was what gave humans an edge. They needed to disrupt the Empire's tech. He couldn't take on the war machines or the elite soldiers head-on, but if they could interfere with their systems, cause confusion among the ranks, they could buy time. Maybe even turn the tide. The plan was risky, and everyone knew it. Soldier Boy's unit moved under the cover of darkness, slipping past Empire patrols and setting up crude electromagnetic jammers they'd managed to cobble together from salvaged equipment. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As the jammers activated, the Empire's communication networks started to falter. Their drones lost contact, their shields flickered, and their advanced weaponry began malfunctioning in small but critical ways. Suddenly, the Empire's troops weren't so invincible. In one key battle, Soldier Boy's unit managed to disable a whole platoon of Empire soldiers by targeting their shields with the jammers. Without their tech functioning properly, the alien soldiers were vulnerable. Earth's forces struck hard, taking out enemies they wouldn't have been able to touch otherwise. For the first time in days, they had a real win. But the cost was high. Many of Soldier Boy's men didn't make it back. The victories they were winning weren't enough to stop the Empire's advance completely, but they were slowing it down. And that was the point. They weren't here to win every battle, they were here to make the Empire feel every inch of ground they took. The Empire, though shaken, wasn't about to back off. Commander Thrak, furious at the setbacks, doubled down. He sent in heavier reinforcements, more troops, more machines. But Soldier Boy had already learned something important. The Empire wasn't unbeatable. They just had to keep pushing, keep adapting, and make every loss count. As the Empire regrouped and began to escalate their assault, Soldier Boy prepared for what was coming next. They had won a few key fights, but he knew the hardest battles were still ahead. The Empire was adjusting, learning from their mistakes, and they would come back even stronger. But so would he. The Empire had shown its hand. Now it was time for Earth to show its teeth. The Empire wasn't slowing down. After the small victories Earth had pulled off, Commander Thrak unleashed a more aggressive strategy. New waves of troops landed on Earth, bringing with them even more terrifying war machines, huge, towering constructs designed to wipe out anything in their path. Their metallic legs crushed everything beneath them, their weapons capable of vaporizing human resistance in seconds. The Empire's determination to crush Earth once and for all was obvious. Soldier Boy and his unit had become symbols of hope, but that hope was being tested every minute. The Empire's reinforcements were everywhere now, and their tactics had evolved. The jammers that had worked to disrupt their tech were being countered. The Empire adjusted their shields, found ways to protect their communications, and became even more relentless in hunting down resistance cells. The guerrilla tactics that had given Earth a slim chance were now becoming harder to pull off. Every day was a battle for survival. Earth's forces were stretched thin, retreating more and more as the Empire advanced. Supplies were running out, and the constant fighting was wearing everyone down. Human casualties mounted, and each loss felt like a blow that Earth couldn't afford to take. It wasn't just about losing soldiers anymore, it was about losing hope. But Soldier Boy wasn't about to let that happen. He knew that the key to winning wasn't just in brute force. They'd never match the Empire's firepower. The strength of humanity was in their ability to adapt, to find solutions where none seemed possible. They needed to change the game again, to hit the Empire in ways they couldn't anticipate. It started with small, calculated moves. Soldier Boy and his team began targeting critical supply lines. The Empire's war machines, powerful as they were, relied on resources just like any other army. Fuel, parts, energy supplies, these were the lifeblood of their invasion. And while the Empire was focused on overwhelming Earth with sheer force, Soldier Boy's team slipped through the cracks, sabotaging their support systems. They hit refueling stations, set traps along transport routes, and ambushed convoys. Each strike was precise, each target carefully chosen to disrupt the flow of resources. The Empire might not have cared about losing soldiers, but they needed those supplies to keep their massive war machines running. Every loss started to add up. Without the fuel they needed, without the steady stream of parts to repair their equipment, the Empire's war efforts slowed. It wasn't enough to stop them outright, but it was enough to give Earth a little more breathing room. Still, Soldier Boy knew they needed more than just small victories. They needed to find a way to cripple the Empire's command structure, to strike at the heart of their invasion. The problem was that the Empire's leadership operated from far above, safely aboard their massive capital ships in orbit. Taking them out seemed impossible. Earth had nothing that could reach them in space. But Soldier Boy had learned to look at problems from a different angle. If they couldn't take out the leadership directly, they could at least throw their operations into chaos. And that's when he came up with a daring plan, one that would either turn the tide of the war or end in disaster. The plan involved getting close to the Empire's main communication hub. This hub, heavily guarded and buried deep within enemy territory, was the nerve center for their entire ground operation. If Soldier Boy could take it out, or even disrupt it for a short time, the Empire's forces on the ground would be thrown into disarray. Without clear orders, without coordination, they would become vulnerable, confused, and scattered. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. But Soldier Boy didn't care. He was willing to do whatever it took to give Earth a fighting chance. He rallied his team, explaining the plan in simple terms. They knew the risks, but they also knew that this might be their only shot. Moving under the cover of darkness, Soldier Boy led his unit deep into enemy territory. Every step was dangerous, patrols were everywhere, and the slightest mistake could lead to their capture or death. But they moved with precision, using their knowledge of the terrain and their experience in guerrilla tactics to stay out of sight. The closer they got to the communication hub, the more heavily guarded it became. Massive alien sentinels patrolled the perimeter, their sensors scanning for any sign of intruders. But Soldier Boy had prepared for this. Using homemade EMP devices, his team was able to disable the Sentinel's sensors long enough to slip through. It was a nerve-wracking process. Every second felt like an eternity as they crept closer to their target. But they made it, reaching the hub undetected. The next part of the plan was the most dangerous. They had to plant charges on the communication relay itself, a massive tower of alien technology that controlled the flow of information between the Empire's forces on Earth and their commanders in space. One wrong move, one alarm triggered, and they would be dead. With steady hands, Soldier Boy set the charges, knowing that if they could pull this off, it would be a major blow to the Empire's invasion. Time seemed to stretch as he worked, the hum of the alien machinery filling the air. His team covered him, watching for any sign of trouble. And then, just as the last charge was in place, the alarm sounded. The Empire's forces reacted instantly. Patrols swarmed the area, sentinels reactivated, and drones took to the sky, searching for the intruders. Soldier Boy and his team had seconds to act. Without hesitation, they detonated the charges. The communication hub exploded in a massive fireball, the shockwave rippling through the alien base. In an instant, the Empire's ground forces were thrown into chaos. Communications between their units failed, orders stopped coming through, and the precise coordination that had made them so deadly began to unravel. Without the constant flow of information from their commanders, the Empire's forces stumbled, unsure of how to respond. Soldier Boy's team had done the impossible. They had struck a blow right at the heart of the Empire's invasion. But now, they had to get out alive. The escape was frantic, with Empire forces closing in on all sides. Soldier Boy's team fought their way through, using every trick they had learned over the course of the war. It wasn't pretty, and they took heavy losses. But they made it, slipping back into the shadows before the Empire could fully react. The damage was done. The Empire, for all its power, was now vulnerable. Their command structure was in shambles, their troops on the ground were confused, and Earth had bought itself a crucial window of time. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was the turning point they had desperately needed. Soldier Boy and his remaining team regrouped, battered but alive. They had dealt a major blow to the enemy, but they knew this was just the beginning of the endgame. The Empire was wounded, but it was still dangerous. The final battle was coming, and they would need every bit of strength, cunning, and determination to finish what they had started. The success of the mission to disrupt the Empire's communications had given Earth a glimmer of hope. For the first time since the invasion began, the Empire wasn't an unstoppable force of nature. They bled, they stumbled, and Soldier Boy had made sure they felt it. But everyone knew this was a temporary reprieve. The Empire would recover, and when they did, they'd come back with a vengeance. There was no room for celebration yet, only preparation for the next battle. The loss of communication had thrown the Empire's ground forces into confusion. Without orders from their commanders, the alien troops became disorganized, their movements erratic. This was Earth's chance, but it was a fragile one. Soldier Boy and his team moved fast, taking advantage of the chaos. They led small strikes against the disoriented Empire soldiers, targeting isolated patrols, hitting supply depots, and striking wherever the enemy seemed most vulnerable. The alien war machines that had once been an unstoppable wall of destruction now hesitated without direct commands. Their firepower was still deadly, but with no clear direction, they became easier targets. Soldier Boy's unit, along with other scattered human forces, started to chip away at the Empire's military presence. Each victory was small but significant. They were buying time, forcing the enemy to react to their unpredictable tactics. But the Empire wasn't idle. It wasn't long before they adapted again. New orders began filtering down to the ground forces, and it became clear that the Empire had shifted to a different strategy. They were consolidating their forces, pulling back from vulnerable positions and fortifying their strongholds. They were done chasing scattered human resistance through cities and forests. Now they were fortifying for a final, decisive strike. Soldier Boy knew what was coming. The Empire was preparing for one overwhelming assault to crush Earth's resistance once and for all. If they could break through humanity's defenses, it would be over. Everything they'd fought for, every life lost, would mean nothing. The Empire had the numbers, the technology, and now the determination to end this war in one brutal strike. And Earth was running out of places to hide. In secret bunkers and makeshift command centers, what remained of Earth's leadership gathered. The reality was grim. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched in every way. But they weren't broken. They had learned too much about the enemy, about their tactics and weaknesses, to roll over now. The key wasn't to match the Empire's strength head-on, it was to outthink them, outmaneuver them. Soldier Boy's voice was firm as he addressed the gathered commanders. We can't meet them in the open. If we try to fight their war, we're dead. But we can make them fight ours. The plan was bold, some might even call it reckless, but it was their only chance. Earth's forces would not gather in one place to make a last stand. That would be suicide. Instead, they would stretch the Empire's resources thin by forcing them to fight on multiple fronts. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and small unit strikes would continue, but with more coordination than ever before. It would be a war of attrition, a war of endurance. The Empire might have the power, but Earth had the will. The final phase of the plan involved targeting the Empire's main landing sites and their fortified positions. These locations were heavily guarded, bristling with defenses, but they were also the Empire's lifeline to the resources they needed to maintain their invasion. If Earth could cut off those lifelines, they could cripple the Empire's ability to continue the war. Soldier Boy was given command of one of the most critical missions. His unit was to lead an assault on a heavily fortified position that housed the Empire's primary fuel reserves. Without that fuel, the alien war machines would grind to a halt. It was a high-risk, high-reward mission, and everyone knew it could be their last. As they prepared for the assault, Soldier Boy's unit gathered in the shadows of the ruined city they had been hiding in. Faces were grim but determined. They had all seen what the Empire was capable of, but they had also seen what humanity could do when pushed to the brink. This was their last stand, but they wouldn't go quietly. The attack began in the dead of night. Using the cover of darkness, Soldier Boy's unit infiltrated the outer defenses, disabling sentries and slipping past patrols. They had learned how to move through enemy territory without being detected, using the chaos of the Empire's disrupted communications to their advantage. But once they reached the fuel depot, there would be no more hiding. The real battle would begin. The depot was a fortress, guarded by dozens of Empire soldiers and towering war machines. Soldier Boy knew they couldn't take it head-on. They had to get creative. Using stolen Empire tech, they hacked into the enemy's defense systems, causing confusion among the ranks. Automated turrets turned on their own, and for a brief moment, the Empire's soldiers were caught off guard. That's when Soldier Boy and his unit struck. Explosives planted on key structures detonated in unison, sending massive fireballs into the sky. The fuel reserves ignited, and the entire depot became an inferno. The alien war machines, suddenly cut off from their fuel, ground to a halt as the fire consumed everything in its path. The Empire's forces reacted swiftly, sending reinforcements to the area, but the damage was done. The depot was lost, and with it, a critical part of the Empire's supply chain. It was a devastating blow to the invaders. But the cost had been high. Many of Soldier Boy's team didn't make it out, caught in the crossfire or killed in the explosion. It was a victory, but a bitter one. With the fuel depot destroyed, Earth had gained a small but significant advantage. The Empire's war machine was slowing down, their ability to resupply their troops and keep their machines running crippled. But there was no time to celebrate. The final battle was approaching, and the Empire, though wounded, was far from defeated. Soldier Boy knew that this was only the beginning of the end. The Empire would regroup, they always did. But now, they were fighting on Earth's terms, and that made all the difference. The next battle would decide everything, and Soldier Boy was ready. No matter what came next, they had proven that Earth wasn't a planet to be conquered easily. The Empire had underestimated humanity's will to survive. They thought they could crush Earth with superior technology and overwhelming force. But Soldier Boy and his team had shown them the truth. Humans were fighters, and they weren't done yet. The Empire would come, and Earth would be waiting. The final battle had arrived. After the destruction of their critical fuel reserves, the Empire was reeling but far from broken. They responded just as Soldier Boy expected, with overwhelming force. Massive warships hovered over Earth's remaining strongholds, their shadows casting a dark omen over the planet. The Empire was making its final push, determined to crush the last remnants of resistance in one decisive strike. Every able-bodied human was called to fight. Soldiers, civilians, anyone who could hold a weapon, stood ready for what everyone knew would be the final stand. There were no more fallbacks, no more retreats. This was it, do or die. Soldier Boy, battered and bruised but unbroken, stood at the forefront of the remaining forces. His unit, what was left of it, was beside him. They had been through hell together, and now they faced it one last time. The Empire unleashed everything. Their war machines advanced like an unstoppable tide, supported by waves of elite soldiers and aerial bombardments that tore the landscape apart. Explosions lit up the sky as Earth's defenses fired back, a desperate attempt to hold the line. For every war machine that fell, Another seemed to take its place. The ground shook with the violence of the assault, but Earth's forces held. They had no choice. Soldier Boy's plan wasn't about meeting the Empire head-on. It was about outlasting them, making every inch of ground they took cost them more than they could afford. He and his team moved quickly, coordinating with other resistance cells across the battlefield. They struck where the Empire was weakest, using the terrain, the ruins of the cities, and their knowledge of the land to harass and slow the enemy's advance. But the Empire had learned from their previous defeats. Their soldiers moved with more caution, their machines more protected, and their strikes more calculated. They adapted quickly, cutting off routes, closing gaps, and using overwhelming force whenever they sensed a threat. It became clear that, despite everything, Earth's forces were being pushed back. The Empire's sheer numbers and firepower were too much to stop. In the middle of the chaos, Soldier Boy received word of a new target. The Empire had deployed their command center closer to the ground, a massive structure that coordinated the entire assault. Taking it out wouldn't end the war, but it would cripple the enemy's ability to direct their forces with precision. Without it, their attack would become disorganized and chaotic, exactly what Earth needed to survive the onslaught. Soldier Boy didn't hesitate. He gathered his team and prepared for the assault. The command center was heavily fortified, surrounded by some of the Empire's deadliest soldiers and machines. But Soldier Boy had faced impossible odds before, and he wasn't about to stop now. They moved under cover of the ongoing battle, using the chaos of the front lines to slip past the enemy's defenses. The approach was brutal. Empire patrols spotted them more than once, forcing them into running gunfights as they closed in on the target. Every step was hard-fought, every moment filled with danger. But they kept pushing forward, determined to reach the command center before it was too late. This mission was their last shot. There would be no second chances. As they neared the command center, Soldier Boy could see the scale of the operation. The structure loomed over the battlefield, its alien architecture pulsing with energy as it coordinated the Empire's forces. Taking it down would deal a massive blow to the invaders. But first, they had to get through the defenses. The fight that followed was brutal. The Empire threw everything they had at protecting their command center: elite troops, drones, war machines, everything. Soldier Boy's unit fought with everything they had, using every last bit of ammunition, every trick they had learned throughout the war. The battle was close quarters, desperate, and deadly. They had no backup, no reinforcements, only themselves and their will to finish the job. One by one, Soldier Boy's team fell. The cost was heavy, but they had known it would be. As the last of the defenders were taken down, Soldier Boy found himself standing at the base of the command center, the charges ready to be placed. The structure was massive, but its core was vulnerable. One well-placed explosion would be enough to bring it down. With steady hands, despite the chaos around him, Soldier Boy set the charges. He knew the second he activated them, the Empire would respond. There would be no time to escape. But that didn't matter. This was what they had fought for, what so many had died for. Earth needed this victory. The charges were armed. Soldier Boy took a deep breath, looking at the battlefield one last time. Then he pressed the trigger. The explosion ripped through the command center, a massive fireball that lit up the night sky. The alien structure collapsed in on itself, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The Empire's forces, now cut off from their central command, hesitated. Confusion spread among their ranks. They were still powerful, still dangerous, but without coordination, they were vulnerable. Earth's forces didn't waste the opportunity. They struck hard, pushing back with everything they had. The Empire's soldiers, now disorganized and leaderless, began to falter. What had been an unstoppable tide was now a broken wave, crashing against Earth's defenses with less force than before. The battlefield shifted in humanity's favor, bit by bit. But the cost had been enormous. Soldier Boy's team was gone, and the battlefield was littered with the bodies of the fallen. Victory, if it came, would be hard-won and bittersweet. Yet, in that moment, as the Empire's forces retreated and their war machines began to fall apart, it became clear Earth had survived. The Empire's fleet in the skies above started to pull back. Without their ground forces to maintain control, the invasion was crumbling. What had been an assured victory for the aliens had turned into a drawn-out nightmare, and now they were cutting their losses. Commander Thrak, humiliated and defeated, gave the order to withdraw. The war was over. Soldier Boy, injured and alone, stood among the ruins of the command center. He had done it. They had done it. Against all odds, Earth had pushed back the might of the Galactic Empire. The cost had been unimaginable, but humanity had proven something no one, not even the Empire, could have foreseen. They were far stronger than anyone had ever given them credit for. As the last of the Empire's ships disappeared into the sky, Soldier Boy allowed himself a moment to breathe. The war was over, but the scars would remain. Earth had survived, but it had been forever changed. And Soldier Boy, the unlikely hero of a battle no one thought they could win, stood as a reminder of what humanity could achieve when pushed to the edge. They had fought. They had survived. And they had won.